Hello, I am Josh Heath, and I am not a therapist.
Hi, Josh.
I am a conflict resolutionist. My program is a thing called Reach Out Role-Playing Games, where I talk about using intercultural dialogue, or I talk about using role-playing games as a tool for intercultural dialogue. I suggested this panel idea because I have struggled to explain to people two things: what intercultural dialogue is and what role-playing games are. And I thought to myself, I am sure people would appreciate a workshop that would help them create a pitch. We're going to go through a couple of different pitch styles and links, create a pitch for you to explain to different audiences what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and what you're trying to get out of it. So, again, I am Josh Heath. If you want to write that down on the thing, I forgot the last presenter's name because she said it, or they said it once, and then it was gone. So I'll say my name a couple of times in case you need it. I have a bachelor's degree in political science with a focus in international, let me get it right, with a focus in ethnic conflict. Then I have a master's degree in international peace and conflict resolution with a focus in ethnic identity, ethnic conflict, and security. I mention that because I recognize that I'm standing in front of a panel of largely people who are here with a therapist background, and I'm coming at things not necessarily from a therapist background, but I have a extreme interest insofar as I wish I could go back 10 years and do a therapy degree so I could be a therapist. So I've read a lot of the literature. I've been involved in trainings with the Bodhana group and with Game to Grow. I attended another conference this year called the Serious Play Conference. If you have not attended that, it is amazing. You should do so. That looks at play from lots of different angles and has lots of different tracks. I'm just pitching it because it's an excellent conference with great people, so you should check it out. I also had a tooth extracted earlier this week, so if I have to just randomly stop, it's probably because my mouth is in pain, and I will pitch to the audience to pick up the slack for a few moments. My hope is this is going to be a workshop. We're going to build some things together. I want you to be able to build 3 different pitches: a single sentence pitch, a 30-second elevator pitch, and a outline, at least, for I'm sitting in front of a group. I have no idea how much time I have. I'm just going to talk until they tell me to leave. Those 3 different levels of pitches are going to be really important because you're going to have different audiences that you're going to work with and different times that you're going to be able to have to pitch them, right? Most people, you're going to have to use your 1-sentence pitch or your 30-second elevator pitch before they even want to talk to you, where you're working into that longer pitch, right? But I'm hoping we can work through a couple of different layers of things to get there. First, for the audience, how many therapists do we have in the room? Most of the folks here. That's good. How many folks here have struggled with pitching therapeutic RPGs to people? Well, good chunk of people. Okay, cool. Then I'm going to lean on the people who didn't raise their hands to say, what have you done that's worked? You can help us. Who here has had to pitch tabletop RPGs to parents? Okay, good chunk of people. Who here has had to pitch, I'm going to say therapeutic, but what I'm really thinking about are social skills building and other developmental support RPGs to schools? A couple of people. Who here is interested in just being able to pitch this better to clients? A couple of people. Some of these audiences are similar. Some of these audiences are very different. That's why I'm trying to get a feel for where people are at so we can focus on some things that I think might be helpful. I generally am pitching what I am doing, intercultural dialogue, to adults and teenagers directly. Then I'm pitching to schools frequently. Then I'm pitching to libraries. I do a lot of library programs. For me, that works. It doesn't necessarily work for therapists, I understand that, but libraries work for me because I'm doing community building as an exercise. Intercultural dialogue is a form of communication where you share your experiences with one another in a form with as little judgment as possible, and then you discuss the differences in understanding of experiences with one another as part of a facilitated process. So, dialogue is not therapy. Dialogue is not discussion. Dialogue is not debate. I emphasize the last one in particular because people like to get into a room and they want to fight with you about the thing that you are there to talk about. That's not necessarily bad, but it's not what dialogue is about. The reason I bring this up is I think it's useful from a therapeutic standpoint also to understand that people are coming into therapy, obviously, for lots of different reasons, right? They're coming to you with lots of expectations. They're coming to you with lots of assumptions about what they want out of the process. And that's true of everybody. So I think building a pitch is helpful for explaining quickly for you what you're hoping to do for them, and then hoping to get them bought into the process. Process, not just for the individual, but for the other stakeholders in their lives. I wish there was a better word for stakeholders, but there we have it. Stakeholders is one of those funny words. Going back, we find ourselves on Lenni Lenape land. This is land that the Native American tribe at the Lenni Lenape did not cede to anybody. My good friend, Lisa Elwood, was a member of the Lenni Lenape tribe, and I think it's useful to just know, hey, this is the land that we are on. There are also many conflicts going on in the world right now, many that I don't want to necessarily directly comment on, but I want us to always be thinking about how can we support ensuring that innocent people are not harmed. I put that in the middle of like all of the things. Lots of people put that stuff at the front. I like to just drop it in here and there. Okay, so building a pitch. Who's your audience? We talked about that, but let's start by building a pitch to a specific audience first. What audience do we want to build our pitch for first?
Funders.
Funders. That is excellent. Okay. Tell me about funders. Are you pitching cold to a funder?
They run the gamut.
Yep.
So typically not cold, but could be.
Okay. So are you pitching face-to-face with someone that you're just meeting, who you're trying to get interested in funding you?
Not distracting at all.
No, not at all. So I created a game called Army Men that I just thought of. Jack was here LARPing out Army Men for us.
I'm so sorry. I didn't want to get in the middle of everything, but
You're good. Okay, so funders is a good one. Funders, you often have either two tracks for funders in my experience, right? You have funders who you are writing a whole developed pitch because they've put out an open call for funding. That's a very different situation because you have a lot of time to develop your pitch in it, right? Or you have, darn, I have to modulate my language here. Darn, I have 30 seconds to talk to this person who's got money in their pocket so that when I do put in this formal pitch, they're like, oh, that person I talked to, they had a real good idea. Now I'm digging into it, right? Okay, funders. Which one of those do you want to talk about real quick? Do you want to talk about the big funding pitch or do you want to talk about the little funding pitch?
I think whatever's going to be most useful for the most of us.
Okay.
That's just my.
I think ballpark it, because then we can trickle down it to smaller fundings.
Okay. What's a role-playing game?
This is not my definition, to be clear, but one definition I like using a lot is Nate Stream's definition, which is make-believe with rules.
Make-believe with
what?
rules.
With rules.
I need another definition. What's a role-playing game? Yes.
Collaborative storytelling where dice can determine success or failure.
Okay. Storytelling. Fun with rules. I need another definition.
Well, I was going to say that I'd have to lose the dice off of that because you can actually do it without that.
Yeah.
So I would just say it's a way that people can work together to tell a story. So collaborative storytelling, which sometimes gives us the ability to, and I extend out on that, to explore who we are for different situations that we are in or want to explore.
I like it. What's role-playing game?
That sounds like I'm being a smart.
No.
But like
Sometimes it's just reframing it, right?
yeah, like you're creating a character and
Everyone's in a similar space, but everyone's creating a different definition, right? I think it's useful to know that you've got to define it for your audience. If you're talking to a funder, what is the funder's ultimate goal? For example, I pitched something to the Department of Homeland Security recently. Not a role-playing game thing, but another thing, right? And their entire focus, their goal was reducing extremism within the United States. Ultimately, reducing extremism so that there's more cultural cohesion. Believe it or not, the government does care about these things. The pitch that I worked on with them took that goal and said, okay, cultural cohesion, community cohesion. We're going to pitch working with particular faith communities to get people who are going to a shared third place not being a work or a place where you spend money, but a place you go to for other reasons. Church is often a third place in people's lives. Church, synagogue, other religious places. If we get people in those spaces to talk to each other about hard things and then work together on things as a community, maybe that'll reduce extremism and build cultural or build community cohesion, right? What I'm trying to get to here is I'm working back and I'm working forward. If I was pitching a role-playing game set up to a similar group, I would say, cool, we're trying to build community cohesion. What we're going to do is we're going to set up multiple small game groups that are working through similar stories focused on these different things, right? And I would say, okay, a role-playing game is a game that is designed to bring a group of people together to work together. There are tools that can be used to create randomization of the storytelling experience within that, right? So you got to think about who your audience is, what their goals are, and match them to that. I think that's fairly obvious, but I think it's good to call it out, right? That you really want to work backward from that. So you've got to always redefine what a role-playing game is for every audience that you're working with. If you're working with kids, you say, hey, this is a fun experience where you get to play a game. And there's going to be some learning things that you're going to get out of this. There's going to be some therapeutic opportunities that we can work on together, but it's going to be fun as opposed to just us sitting there staring at each other, working really hard to get to somewhere that we're both happy with, right? That you're happy, that you're comfortable with. I don't think therapists think about themselves enough in a therapeutic setting, but it's something I think is useful to think about too. If you're facilitating a game, you have to think about how you are going to be feeling, doing, being in that space, right? So don't forget yourself. It's my random pep talk for the day. All right. So we've got this funding group. We're thinking about what's a role-playing game. We're trying to decide what their goals are. And we are aligning our definition of a role-playing game with their goals. And we're trying to do so quickly, right? We're trying to say a role-playing game does a thing. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing in your pitch, that is an active thing. What is the role-playing game going to create? What is it going to help with? What is it going to do? One of the worst things you can do, we'll have a list of don'ts and we'll have a list of do's, but one of the worst things you can do is say, there's this cool Dungeons and Dragons game where you go out and you kill all these goblins, and then as you're killing them, like, there's this amazing, like, story thing where you get to, like, romance random, like, tavern keepers and, like, buy them drinks. Every one of us, I'm sure, has that story of a role-playing game where if you're talking to your friends, you would reminisce about it. Maybe not in that exact way, because I was being a little extreme, but you are never going to get anybody, except for a fun group, to buy in to the beneficial uses of role-playing games if that's where you start with, right? So, for a funder, and we'll go with some other groups here in a moment, but for a funder, you're looking at your goal, right? You're looking at how you define a role-playing game, and then you're trying to figure out what it does. In my extreme example, right, with Homeland Security, you're saying to them, hey, you're trying to build community cohesion, you're trying to get people working together, you're trying to reduce extremism. So a role-playing game gives you the opportunity to trust other people. That is a action word that you can build out of a role-playing game, right? If you're trying to build a social skills group, you can say, hey, the awesome thing is that role-playing games can create a safe space where you trust one another. And once you have that trust, you're able to talk more easily to one another. You're able to work through problems more easily together. Or, honestly, you're able to open up conflict more honestly, right? Because you've got the trust to be able to say, I'm mad at you right now. We've got the action, and then we're showing examples, right? Those two things are really important in your pitch. You want to have actions that you're trying to get, that you're trying to develop, and then you have examples when you get deeper into your pitches about how that specific action produces outcomes. Yes?
You could probably also, in a longer pitch, kind of utilize the fact that with a game within, or with a group within the narrative of a role-playing game, oftentimes there is a accelerated process of forming, storming, or adjourning that because it's happening in the narrative at accelerated pace, sometimes that causes the members of the group to then go through those stages at accelerated pace, thus forming social skills and coming together for the purpose of the group at a pace that can be accelerated through that modality.
So I love that. I want to call out a thing you did that I know is you use jargon. You use really cool jargon, right, to describe the process of building a group within a role-playing game setting, right? We need to be careful about it because it's not bad, but I'm not saying you did it bad here because we're on the same page. So you have to know your audience, right? You have to know if my audience already knows this jargon. For example, if you are pitching to a funder or you're talking to a supervisor within your therapy organization, and you're saying, hey, I'd like to use tabletop role-playing games, it is okay in those cases to use your jargon, right? Because you know that jargon is going to be helpful because they have semiotic attachment to that jargon. What do I mean?
The jargon's only helpful if that person already knows it, and then they can go ahead and self-identify with that.
Exactly.
It's kind of what we were talking about next door a minute ago with fandoms and so forth.
Yeah. And that's really valuable, right? When you're talking to a client who's coming in who's never done therapy before, and you're like, hey, I think you're a really good candidate for this this group that I've got. It's a therapeutic role-playing game group, right? The reason I think it's particularly good for you is it would be a good way for you to get familiar with some of the skills that we'll work on one-on-one together, but you're able to put them into practice with this group. No jargon. But in another setting where you've got a client like me, and my therapist hates me because I'm like, all right, I know all about CBT, I know about integrated family systems, like, you can't do this to me, right? He's like, my therapist is awesome because he's like, that's good because now I can ask you what you would like to work, what modalities you would like to work with, right? Use those, right? Use those when you have an opportunity. You know someone knows a thing. It's okay to use your jargon effectively, right? So that's a good thing that you did not intentionally get us to, but I really appreciate it because it was one of the things I wanted to touch on. Another don't that I think will lead us into good spaces. Don't talk about mechanics. Gamers, most of us in this room, I'm assuming, gamers love to talk about mechanics. Whether or not it's D20s, whether or not it's this cool deck of like cards that I got for this one awesome game, whether it's feats, whether it's values, whether it's whatever it is that's a mechanic in the particular game that you're running, no one cares. I'm telling you, I love you all. No one cares. Because it doesn't matter for what you're actually trying to do, right? If you're using a D20 system, if you're using Powered by the Apocalypse, if you're using Fate, most people are going to get stuck on Dungeons and Dragons. Most people are going to get stuck on a role-playing game. Everything else beyond that, that's for when you're doing the thing, right? That's when you're teaching the game to people. That's when you're playing the game. People are going to get super excited when they've got those dice or those cards or whatever. Jenga Tower, if you've never played Dread, oh my gosh, great. Lots of mechanics that are fun, right? But don't in your pitch put mechanics. Because the second you do, you've lost your audience, regardless of if they're already a gamer. Because you're having a totally different conversation. So the thing to do instead is talk about what games, again, we're going to kind of go back to this. What do games do? So I'm going to ask the group that. Let's give a couple of examples. What do games do?
What I was going to go for, just taking it out of context for my other job, is that it gives us a safe place to make mistakes, that we can learn from those mistakes. So if we're doing table discussion or role play of an emergency situation where we play it out, and 5 minutes later these guys will be able to arrive, whatever, this kind of stuff. Could put in random stuff in there, or you can just go through whatever you already have. But either way, it's giving us a safe place to make mistakes without people's lives being on the line.
I work in emergency management, and emergency simulations are an incredibly important tool. I just want to call that out. I agree with you. The ability to make mistakes and it not be high stakes, super important.
It's cheaper too. You're sitting there.
Way cheaper. Yeah. Cool. So that's a good one. What's another thing that role-playing games do? We could do this.
Teach executive function skills.
Teach executive functioning skills. What do you mean?
So, organization of data, working memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, perspective taking, social reciprocity, so back and forth conversation skills.
Imagine I'm a parent I'm in my early 20s. I have a kid who's 12, to tell you a thing. I don't have a degree. I care, but I have no clue what you're talking about. Break it down. How do you talk about executive functioning to that parent?
Helping your child make and keep friends, helping your child do better with their homework, improve their math skills, improve their reading skills, improve their ability to remember all the things you're trying to get them to do and they're not doing.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yeah.
The way I always kind of pitch this to parents is that, like I'll say like the executive function skills, and I'm like, that's all the things that you need your brain to do. So when you tell him to stop playing the video game and go do their chore, that's the thing that your brain is trying to do, and those are the skills that we're going to build.
I love both of that. And all of that is still relevant to regardless of who you are pitching to, right? Because everybody has an agenda. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but we can make it sinister if we want to. Everybody's got an agenda. I want to do what I do full time, but I will probably never be able to do so until I retire from my day job because my day job pays the bills, right? So my agenda here is to continually be learning, building, and increasing my skills so that when I get the opportunity, if I don't die before I retire, to be dark, to do this in the future, right? To do this full time and be like, I see the value of role-playing games in these other spaces. Let's use them for transformative purposes. I'm telling you one of my agendas, that's okay. But everybody has an agenda. And so what you're trying to get to, one of the things you need to break down for them is what is their agenda? Lots of parents care about, I want my kids to do the things I'm asking them to do. I want my kids to be happy. I want my kids to do better than I'm doing, right? Most parents want that. So when you're pitching to a parent, think about those things, right? What do they want? You can even ask them. It's always okay to ask whomever you're pitching a thing to, even in a couple of seconds. Hey, I'm really interested in the value of role-playing games for transformative purposes. What does that make you think of? What things are important to you when you hear those things, right? It is always okay to do a check on learning or a check to make sure that you are saying the thing that you want them to come away from, right? Because they've got an agenda and you want to make sure that you are, while you're trying to convince them to let you do the thing you want to do for their good, that your agendas match. But you shouldn't necessarily tell people what your agenda is. You should be matching their agenda until they start asking questions and then digging into it, right? What do I mean? Why do I say that? Because if you bring up your agenda, they're immediately going to have a cognitive block. There's actually probably a nice, cool term for it, and I don't know. But the second you say, hey, I'm looking to do X, Y, and Z here, they go to no. Most people go to no immediately. Because they're like, no is easy. No saves me money. No is safer because I know what no looks like. They might not know what no looks like, but they're going to think that they know what no looks like. So it is really useful. This is a technique I learned in deep canvassing. It is really useful to open up by saying, hey, I'm here to talk about let's see, let's go to a random example. There's a union for steelworkers in town, and they're having a dispute with the steel plant. I'm curious what your opinion of this issue is. Give a brief framing of what you're looking for. Hey, I'm a therapist and I use role-playing games as a tool in my therapeutic practice. What is something that you do in your particular work that we may align on? That was a bad question, right? I butchered that just now. It's okay to butcher your thing too. It's okay to butcher your pitch because you should butcher your pitch until you get it right. Okay. We've talked about a couple of different things. I'm sure there's some other things I want to get into, but let's start working on small pitches together. I want everybody to take 30 seconds to write down a single sentence pitch. You're walking down the hallway and you see a person that you want to have a further conversation with in the future about therapeutically applied role-playing games. Or transformatively applied role-playing games, if you prefer that term. Go. Okay.
Who is the person? Because as we established, context matters for
Yes.
like forming that language.
They are a person of authority who can help you in furthering the use of your activity. Trying to keep it slightly open, but that is good context. Okay. Time. And it's okay not to be finished. Who would like to share?
I have an idea for a group therapy that will reduce burnout and increase client engagement.
Reduce burnout.
So we're talking to a supervisor
Yep.
theoretically. We're talking about therapist burnout, client burnout.
What are the key parts of your pitch that you think, if you had to pull out a single chunk of it, was the most important word you said?
Client engagement.
Anybody else?
So I just said I would like to do a social skills therapy group using role playing as the main modality. Other themes can be added as appropriate to the group. And one of the things I was thinking about with this, because I was picturing our supervisor who had to do a pitch too. She knows nothing about role playing games, nothing nerdy at all. And so thinking about jargon and stuff, that's the word that is more likely to trip her up. And so thinking of how to explain that without using just like role playing games, because what does that mean?
What's the most important word in your pitch?
I think the social skills is the main thing.
Yes.
So mine is I work in school, so I'd say I want to start a group that uses games to engage students in practicing real life social and problem solving scenarios.
What's the most important chunk of that? Doesn't have to be a single word, but what's the most important element of your pitch?
We're on the same page about wanting to teach some social skills and problem solving. The games
This one I did as if I was doing this at my current position there, so that I'm trying to pitch it to somebody for a safety thing, all right? So what I was saying with this is, when you have a moment later, I need to talk to you about a fantastic tool in order to figure out whatever. It utilizes role-playing scenarios to work through situations and where we can make improvements. What I was thinking with that one is that I wouldn't couch it as a game, because somebody hears game, it's a waste of time. Why are we doing this? So by just avoiding that terminology altogether, maybe we just run around it.
Yes.
So mine was, I'd like to talk to you about how using more groups can help out the guidance department better and let me use my time more efficiently to see more kids. That's to my district administration. I'm going with the efficiently. That's my.
That was clear, the keyword there, and I feel that when you're like, I'm trying to use my time efficiently and save money. Lots of, I get that. Yes.
Hi, I'm David. I run Game On, which brings the joy and social benefits of role-playing games to kids and adults, especially the neurodiverse. I'd like your help to see how games like these might help your organization.
I like it. What's the most important chunk?
Help.
Help. Any guess?
I would love to offer groups in like a hospital setting, go in and just do, but so that's not going to be something where we're paying $10,000, $20,000 a day for ICU or whatever for a hotel room, not for a hospital room. So I was thinking for a hospital administrator or somebody who can help with that. Hey, I'd like to offer an opportunity for your kids to have some fun while getting to see themselves as powerful, strong.
Powerful and strong. For your audience, that's really important. What I want us to do in these pitches, right, is break them apart. You've got your words that matter and the words that you just have to use to get to the words that matter, right? Grammar is a thing. You don't use the, a, and. You may not be able to build a sentence, right? But those words are less important because they're just getting you to the words that matter, right? The words that have power. Power like efficiency. Yes.
I mean, would you imagine that they have a connection more emotionally speaking? Like if that we're looking for the words to matter, the ones that are going to kind of grab you emotionally, kind of keep you going, oh, okay, that caught my attention versus, because I'm going to be honest, like there's times when I hear a pitch and I'm in a supervisor position, I hear a lot of pitches. And a lot of times my brain just goes, turns itself off when someone gets beyond word 5 because they've used even jargon words that I know very well. I go, not interested, in this fool. And it's not like I'm trying to not engage with them. My brain just shuts off.
Mm-hmm. You're trying to use engagement words, right? And that might be emotional engagement. It might be agenda engagement. Because if I'm a supervisor who's like, man, we are $7,000 over budget, whatever, this month, and you're telling me, hey, I'm going to save us money by doing X, Y, and Z, you are immediately going to have my attention because you're telling me the thing that is the problem that I have, right? My agenda is to save us money, and you're saying, hey, this will save us money. Because then that gets you in deeper, gives you like the opportunity to, then the person's paying attention. Then they're asking questions. The second the other person starts asking questions, you've won. You have won. You may not win long term, but you have won that initial pitch, right?
That's the hook.
Right. You walk up to a person and say, hey, my name is Josh Heath. I work with Reach Out Role-Playing Games. I do intentional dialogue using tabletop role-playing as a method to get people to talk about the things that they struggle explaining, right? If they then go, oh, well, what's a role-playing game? Okay, that's a hook. If they go, okay, how is that going to help my students? The awesome thing about your students is that they come from different backgrounds, they have different experiences, they have different understanding of the things that have led them to where they are as a student, even if they've been in that same school from kindergarten to 8th grade. This is an opportunity for them to explore that together, right? Yes.
So in that moment right there, like, let's say, well, how does that help my students? Is that where you're talking about a good moment to turn around and say, what are the problems you're facing with your students?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because then they're gonna unload on you in a good way.
And then you have all this data you can now pull from and say, here's how what we do helps them.
Exactly.
So your pitch suddenly becomes a lot more tailored.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yep. Because what you're trying to do, and I learned this in sales, and then I learned it in simulation building, which is a strange thing to learn these two skills, but asking these sorts of questions about the agenda, about the needs, about the thing, core-ish. There's a word here that is really hard to figure out what it is. Motivation isn't quite it, right? What is the thing that drives that person in all of this, right? Because if I'm a budget person, I'll be honest, I probably don't actually care about the budget per se. I care about doing whatever has got me into being stuck being the budget. I work in helping fields, right? I care about helping people. I care about making sure that taxpayer money is spent efficiently because I care about people. So if you come to me and say, hey, I've got this idea that's going to help us reduce our budget and help people more effectively. Boom, boom. You've hit both nails on the head, right? You've hit both things that are going to drive me to pay attention. And you've probably figured that out by asking that follow-up question. Absolutely right. Okay. So we've got these small pitches. We've got our keywords that are trying to open the door to a further conversation. We're asking good follow-up, engaging questions to get their needs so we can tailor it further. But what happens if you have to pitch someone in an email? Don't have the opportunity in an email to ask follow-up questions. How long should an email pitch be?
Just 3 paragraphs at most.
3 paragraphs. Interesting, yes.
I learned a really good trick with that, and it's I learned this straight from the CEO of a Fortune, not Fortune, but a big company, right? It said, I want to see every paragraph split into single sentence lines. And now I write my emails that way. You write a sentence, double space, sentence, double space, sentence. A, it forces you to summarize big time because it looks weird to have an email this long with that many sentences. And B, you know what your most important starts are. I love when people write emails to me like that. I get through them in 2 minutes. It's fantastic. And ever since I started doing that with big funding sources, because I'm talking from experience. I just secured $64,000 to do tabletop role-playing games in schools. So when I started writing emails that way, it made a huge difference. Just a single sentence, double space for each one. Visually easy.
Thank you, because that's where I was going to get us to. Because you did exactly what every good writer wants to do.
Right.
They want to write an incredibly well-crafted story that drives people to become invested and agree and support the program. I learned in sales, I worked in sales for 10 years.
Subject line.
People sometimes don't read beyond the subject line, so you've got to get them at the subject line. You've got 3 to 4 words to get a person. The upward facing dash thing, by the way, is a really powerful thing to use in subject lines. I don't know why. People click on emails that have a subject line with that weird, not I, that's like a single line, something like 85% more than it is.
What?
What's that?
The character. There's a weird character. Not the arrow. It's just the line.
Like the pipe symbol?
Maybe. I don't even know what the word is, but if it's on
You're
your
talking like a vertical line, not a.
Yep, a vertical line.
So right next to the backslash.
Yep.
front slash, whatever.
Oh, yeah, it's a
You put
Why?
that in the subject line?
Put that in the subject line.
I know
Why?
technology.
I have no idea. But for whatever reason, people
wanna-
see it.
I want to see the literature on that.
It blew me away.
Let's do a research paper.
Yeah.
Someone has to have studied it, so I want to see that study.
Not at the start. It has to be in the subject line. Like there's usually a word, that symbol, and then one or two other words.
I wonder. Okay, so wait, this actually is the thing, because it makes me think of break testing with marketing, where they do a color block. You
Yep.
have one solid color, and that's it. There's no
Yep.
pictures, nothing. It's just simple words, color block. It stops the human brain for
Yep.
whatever reason.
Yep.
Duplicate.
It's a very similar thing with this, right?
Interesting.
So that is a little slightly off topic tidbit,
Well, it's
but
good marketing. It's okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So in your subject line, if you use a thing like that, that's a thing you could do. But your subject line got to be real short, and then everything. Or this is the point I was trying to get to. People read on average in an email about, I want to say it was 45 words max. I almost flipped the table when I got told that at work. I was like, I read every single email I get from bottom to top. And if they're longer, I read them more excitedly. But I'm not the average person, right? I know that. So the average person wants something condensed. They want to know what they're going to get out of it. They want to know what they need to do. So you want it to be short. You want it to have an action that you're trying to get them to do. You want them to understand what you are going to do for them as quickly as possible. Now, I promise you, having actually taken courses in memo writing, it's hard. It is hard. It's probably going to be something that you're going to struggle with if you're a writer, right? I had to write 250-word memos in one class. I had to write 100 of them in this class. 250-word memos. Wow. I never got over a B on my memos. My professor was like, you can't write memos for crud. They didn't use that word. They used other words, several of them. But the point was, I struggled with that, right? I still struggle with it. But in an email, you've got to make sure that you're as concise as possible and that you are separating it space-wise so it is easier for them to absorb that information, right? Who am I? What I'm going to do for you, what I need you to do. I sent an email to Peter Atkinson, worked Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering, Gen Con, lovely dude. I said, hey, I'm doing this program called Reach Out Role-Playing Games. I think you'd be really interested in it. I'm wondering if you would invest a little bit in this project. The email was maybe 4 more words than that. Emailed me back. He said, hey, I love what you're doing. The idea is awesome. I am not in a place right now to invest in a project like that. I'm also the type of person who will ask anybody a question. Clearly. Right? I am not scared of that. And I encourage you to, if you have imposter syndrome about asking people for a thing, work on it. Because the best thing you can do in your life, this is just life advice, is just ask the question if it's in your head. Because the worst thing that the other person can do is say no. And no can hurt. Trust me, I know. But that's not the end of the world. Usually that's the beginning of a conversation. Hey, no, I can't help you with that, but I know who can. So if you approach someone with a short pitch and you say, hey, I'm interested in doing a program in this library, and the cool thing about the program that I'm looking to do is it will get kids to come in and spend time in the library together without video games. Every librarian in the world immediately went, yeah! Because I used a couple of keywords And then I know what their problem is. They want to engage more kids at the library because they believe in the library. They believe in the power of the library. They believe in kids. And they think that video games are kind of a barrier. I don't think video games are a barrier. But I know why lots of people do. So when I'm talking about role-playing games, I often remind them, hey, this is an analog game where you have to work with each other, you have to talk to each other, you have to be engaged with one another around the table. Of course, every time I work with kids, they have their character sheet on their phone. No problem. Some of them have laptops where they have D&D Beyond up, they have Roll20 up. I use these tools because these tools are really valuable. But often, you want to emphasize that these are not video games because, one, people hear game and immediately think you're talking about a video game. Yeah. The worst thing for me when I started pitching my thing was I would go to peace building organizations. Do this a lot. I'd go in and be like, hey, I've got this awesome idea about doing dialogue with tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. And they would go, okay, that sounds awesome. They'd listen to me for like 5-10 minutes and they go, so what system does it run on?
Yes, they weren't talking D20.
No. And it's still the hardest thing for me to work through with folks, right? Where they hear game, and particularly for some reason in the peace building world, they think video game is the solution. There's lots of peace building video games out there, believe it or not. Some of them are good. Most of them are atrocious. But you've got to break through that assumption with people very quickly. But then what I'm telling you is don't be afraid to use those digital tools, right? Just avoid talking about them, right? Okay.
That's another whole panel right there, baby.
Yeah, that's a big topic. Yes.
The thing that irony of playing into your idea of it matters who you're pitching to is how we pitched it to the autistic teenagers at our school to get them to come to the group is like, it's like a video game, but you get to make your own character and you get to decide what the plot is. And they really like, so it's just funny. Like with them, we're like, oh, it's like a video game. Don't worry, it's not like school.
Yep. On that note, I once pitched to a bunch of kids. I was like, it's kind of like Minecraft, where you get to like make your own like world and structure, but you're doing it together. And then you get to tell us your own kind of story in the world that we build together. They were super excited and like, and then I brought miniatures and I brought dungeon building tools and I incorporated those things where I was like, cool. Here's the flat dungeon. Let's build the dungeon together. They built the little dungeon bits, and then they were like, okay, and now we're like, all right, cool. Your characters are going through the dungeon that you guys just built together. So it totally, like your audience, you gotta know how to pitch them. If you use video game jargon as a way to get them to the table, that's cool. But most of your parents and your funders and your supervisors are going to balk a little bit about video games often. And it's weird because we know video games are awesome, right? But the moment they hear video game, it just creates an entirely different conversation. So I always emphasize, hey, it's not a video game. It's an analog game where you are doing shared storytelling, right? We used those words earlier, right? Where you are building a thing together, where you are using social skills, whatever you're using, but you emphasize early and often in a pitch, it's not a video game. Unless you are, right? Right, we were just talking about that. Unless you have a specific group where you're like, this will work with that. So know your audience. Let's do a 30-second elevator pitch together. Let's build it together line by line. 30 seconds, you have about 50 words. 30 seconds. Depends on how fast you are, but if you're super fast, you're probably not being understood. So imagine you're trying to say as much as you can in 30 seconds. Let's see, what's a good person? A school principal at a school that does not have a parent-teacher organization, making this real to my own life. Principal at a school who does not have a parent-teacher organization, does not have a lot of time to talk to you, but really, really cares about the fact that their math scores are not as high as they were last year. This principal is African American. This principal lives in a primarily African American community in Maryland. I'm really making this about my own life, but I'm trying to give you some context. This principal has multiple PhDs, none of them in therapy, but you are looking to do something similar to a social skills building program in the school. Okay, so that's the scenario. I almost want to say roll initiative, but let's start with the first sentence. What's our first sentence in our 30-second pitch? Let's get a couple of different options.
We can help you fix the math problem.
We can help you fix the math. Love that. Okay. Any suggestions about we could help you fix the math problem?
I would like to be strengths-based, but I'd maybe say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about increasing your math scores at school.
Like that. Good. And we're working together on crafting that sentence a little bit stronger, right?
This person is an educator, and they are seeing themselves as the one who needs to teach and fix this. I have a tool to help you fix this problem.
Correction, this person is a administrator.
Correct.
There's a cultural difference there.
Yes.
So they're going to be worried more about financial things than you think?
Well, so actually come back to this idea of strength-based versus problem-solving based.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a crossover between therapy world and business world. Business world is solve problems based, not strengths based. I can tell you right now, no CEO would give a crap about me saying, I'm going to increase mobility. He wants to know what problems you're solving.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're talking to a principal, they're more like, and I've said it's in my experience here, which could be different others, but for my experience with some of the principals is when I say, hey, we can solve this problem, they go, I love you. Because they want to solve problems. And I'm strength-based too. In my therapy, on my notes, it's all increase, because I like the way that's phrased. But when I talk to the administrators and business people, it's always, how do I solve your problem? It's always, you got this one, how do I fix it?
I like this conversation.
But I feel like principals are such a middle ground.
They can be, but they can.
It depends on the
That's why,
principal.
that's why I say,
Yeah.
based on my experience, because I'm coming from principals who were not educators first and foremost, they went into administration first.
Yeah. We have some thoughts on the side of the room that I want to pull.
For insight on this principal. Yeah, I feel like I would want to know like their backgrounds a little more. Their just people have a lot of different attitudes about education. Because like I think my go-to would be to talk about how we're going to engage students in interactive math skills because
Well,
I don't know. Like I just feel like I feel like the benefit of role-playing games for students in general is the buy-in. That you're getting buy-in to work on things that you know the school wants them to work on, but the kids aren't going to be motivated unless it's gamified.
Yeah. So this principal has an MBA. This principal also has a doctorate in organizational leadership.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I rolled a 5, so I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So bouncing off that, we're assuming they already know there's a math problem that they want solved.
Mm,
Maybe
they do.
Going-
They know that. So I think we can assume that. Yeah,
so.
but it's
Maybe
okay.
going a step further, based on that, I have an idea for how to make kids want to do math.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really like that.
I like that because it's strength-based oriented
And it's still true.
and it's a problem solving. That's a
You're
good
giving
solution.
them
It also is a nice hook because then what's your idea? Because
Critical, man. You got the 20.
And what can you offer that his staff can't? Because he's got math teachers already to teach math. It's like, how do we get them to want to do math?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where we come in.
Yeah, I like that.
So let's give that to us again.
I have an idea for how to make kids want to do math.
I have an idea how to get kids to want to do math. Great. That's our opening line, right? But you've got 30 seconds. Say stop. And their eye goes up. They tilt slightly to the side. They're listening. So you've got 30 seconds. What's the next thing you say?
We're gonna create an interactive environment, like interactive scenario.
I'd say game. I'd say game.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
We're gonna create an interactive game that lets them act out math problems for real life scenarios. Maybe not
Okay.
act out, but-
I might even say, can I build on that? I might even say, we're going to create a fantasy role-playing game that incorporates math skills in a way that makes kids want to to learn math without focusing on math.
So I like where we're going. I'm gonna
Keep
I
going, yeah.
want to refine it, right? So we've opened with, I have an idea to get kids to want to do math,
Yeah.
right? We've got this idea to make math more exciting by using a fantasy role-playing game where math is an integral part of the experience.
There you go. That's why you teach the class.
So we've got those two factors, right? And now we've got the second segment where we're like, we've introduced that it's a game. We've introduced that math is something that is essential to it. Now here's the problem. D&D 5th edition doesn't actually have much math in it, right?
Right.
But we've got this idea. We think role-playing games can do this, and I agree, because I set up this scenario. I agree that math is a thing. What game are we pitching? How are we pitching math in this?
We're using my game, so you guys can all buy it.
Yeah.
No, but you could, I mean, but let's say you're using, I already use it in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm assuming in this scenario, we have a game in mind. But
Maybe, yeah.
if we just say it's fancy role-playing game, I just don't know, that's what I do. But like, we could say, we create a scenario or story that requires players to use their math skills to solve an in-game problem.
There we go. There we go. I like it. Because then we're agnostic about the system,
Right.
right? And I really want you to think like that, right? Be agnostic to the system. Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is an amazing game. However, it is not always the best game for your audience. If your audience are super into kids with broomsticks, there's a game called Kids on Brooms, right?
Yep.
If your audience is super into Minecraft, there's games that have Minecrafty feels to them, right? Play something like Dread, because then they've got the Jenga tower to interact with and feel with, right? Bring Lego and help them build dungeons with you, right? Be system and game agnostic as much as possible, right? This is just me trying to encourage you to play other games but also I think it's really valuable to be thinking forward to that, going, hey, if I get an audience of kids who are super into superheroes, right? Then pitch them a superhero role-playing game, right? Marvel just released one that's kind of bad, but like you could use that book, right? And that's fine. Or you can use Masks, which is a great superhero role-playing game, right? There are, what's that?
There's a system called the Hero Instinct.
Yes. So many good ones, right? So figure out what your audience, when you get there, figure out what the audience wants, and then choose the game, and then build in the things you're trying to pitch, right? You're trying to pitch these skills, right? Math skills are the thing. Cool. In every scenario, in every encounter, there is going to be a math problem, right? And you can even tell the kids this, right? If you're working with kids. In this case, we're working with kids, right? Hey, there's going to be some math problems in here. I want you to use your problem-solving skills together to answer those questions, right? You don't have to do it in a silo because you're trying to get them to teach each other. Also, anyway, we're in pitch, and I'm way in like implementation land. Okay, so we've had a couple of sentences. We've talked about how we're going to do it. What's the last sentence that really gets them to go, let's set up a meeting with other administrators, with other decision makers? Yes.
How do we make this happen?
Great. I like that. How do we make this happen? Because then you're assuming they're already bought in. As a salesperson, that is a great technique, right? Because then they're going to defend it even if they aren't fully bought in. Or
It's a bit heavy-handed though too.
It can be.
You get somebody just to go, the hell do you mean we? You got a mouse in your pocket? I mean,
sure, with the wrong person, absolutely, which is exactly where I was going, because you could get there. So you're asking for the sale, and it may be too early. And they might put up objections. Objections are good, because the second they give you objections, and you can ask them questions to start working through their needs and work through those objections, right? Objections are not no. Even if they say no, and I'm not saying no doesn't mean no, no does mean no. But in this type of conversation, a no is often a I don't understand, right? And so you ask them questions to kind of make sure that you're on the same page, right?
what if you were able to parlay it into a meeting with the educators that are actually going to be front line? So now you've got, if you can get the teachers on your side to go against, I mean, not that it's against them, but against the administration, then you've got that sale back at that point.
Absolutely.
What's our next step?
That's a good one too. You could also say, working these two things together, can we get a couple of teachers together to talk about this idea?
Yep.
And if you're in the best case, you've already got one teacher in your pocket, right? Who has bought it. Yes.
I can say from a two perspective point, it's like having been the one that's been pitched to and having pitched.
Mm-hmm.
Like asking the what's the next step question is not one I would ask, because I want you to suggest to me what my next step is. So kind of like I said, can we get some teachers today to talk about this further, because that makes me say, oh, I can do that. That's something I can put together. Like, giving me like a small bite-sized task would help me be more invested, I think. Is that fair to say?
Exactly, because it immediately makes you become the problem solver. You want the person you're pitching to become the problem solver. Yes.
So psychology, rather than asking a yes, no, closed-ended question, change that around. Change the word can to when.
Yeah.
When can we get a couple of
Make
teachers?
it something pitched today.
Yep. I love that. Okay. When can we get a couple of teachers together for us to discuss this idea? Great. We've got a 30-second pitch. We got an elevator pitch, right? It is really targeted, and I get that. But I think there are a couple of layers in here, right? You have a good, strong opening with action. You have a centerpiece that kind of demonstrates how you're solving the problem that you've opened. And then you're creating space for buy-in and collaboration to move forward. You can do the same thing in email. You can do the same thing instant messages. Did this with a library once. I couldn't find any other way to contact them, and I could not get physically to the library for a few days. So I sent them a message on Facebook. I said, hey, I love this library. I'm just super busy right now, and I want to talk to the team coordinator about a program to help get people doing a thing. I don't know exactly what I said there, but yes.
This brings up the question of how do you identify the person you need to pitch to?
Yeah, it's hard. So you're sometimes going to need to pitch to multiple people, right? Sometimes you can say, hey, your pitch, are you the right person to talk to about getting this set up? It might be a yes, no. Or you can, let's change that from a yes, no.
If you're not, then who do I need to talk to?
Yeah, maybe. How do we make that non-yes, no? Because it really kind of has to be almost.
Tell me who I need to talk to get this, moving.
There
You
we
can
go.
just start off with a question, yeah.
Yep.
Hey, who do I need to talk to about this, about an idea I have for?
Yeah, I like that. Getting in the door is always hard, right? But every person you talk to is a person you can get to buy into your idea. I once had multiple meetings with a peace building organization, multiple meetings. I got the first person I talked to super into it, so much so that they were my biggest advocate. We had multiple meetings. People were sort of into it. Finally, the CEO, I think, I don't know his actual title, president or something like that, was like, I don't know that we can pitch this to our funders to do this specific type of intervention, right? So sometimes you will get to a point where you've got lots of people bought in, everybody sees the value of it, and then someone goes, I don't know how to pitch this to the other decision makers. You can do what I did, which was, I would love to be able to set up a conversation with them if you think we can do so. And they were like, I don't want you to do that because they had control issues. But they weren't totally bought in, and so they weren't willing to put their political capital in play to get other people to buy into it, right? Here's the thing, though. Sometimes you'll run into that, and you just have to walk away. You walk away from those group of people. You say, this is awesome. I had a lot of conversations. Because every pitch gets you better for the next pitch.
If they weren't it's one thing if they're not willing to, they don't want to play ball because they don't want to put their head on the line or whatever.
Yep.
But if they are in, but you can't do the pitch for whatever reason, you can still then train them. So now they become your disciple.
Absolutely.
And they go and do the thing for you.
Absolutely. And if you have that opportunity where they are pitching it for you, right, give them your resources, right? If you have an outline of what your project is going to look like, for example, when I'm creating a dialogue program, I always create an outline where I start week 1 to week 10. We have a 10-week program. We're going to spend 2 hours, one at the top, one at the bottom, doing a pre-brief and end brief. We're going to do our sessions for 90 minutes to 2 hours. I have all of that information laid out, right? And then I give it to them and say, this is the entire program in a box. But then I tell them, and I give them the tools we're working through here. I give them the don'ts. Don't talk about the game, right? As in, don't talk about the game system. Don't talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Don't talk about masks. Don't talk about Powered by the Apocalypse. Don't talk about fate. The second you get into those things, you've lost your people, right? Unless the person is like secretly a super big like nerd like we are, and they're like coming to me. because you get those people sometimes. I was recently in a meeting where I'm like, hey, I need like about surveys. Like I need your support about survey stuff, and I have this big picture on behind me of He-Man characters playing D&D, and they were like, "Is that a He-Man painting?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I kind of described it. I'm like, "I'm a big nerd," and she's like, "So am I." And we started talking about comic books and all the conventions we went to, and then she was like, "What do you need?" Right? So sometimes you get that person who is immediately like, "You're speaking my language. I just didn't realize this is a thing." But 98% of the time, you're not.
That's interesting too, because we bring up the question of culture here.
Yeah.
And I can think of multiple reasons why you don't bring up the system, and I like this, because it's like, even if they're a big nerd, they might have something really against D&D 5th edition because
Yeah.
it's not as good as Pathfinder or something.
Yes.
Or you might run into those that have never played it before, and they're like my dad, they're like, D&D, that's for 30-year-olds in their mom's basement, right?
Yeah.
They worship Satan, is that true? Like, and you're up against this cultural background. Whoa, okay, see, like, yeah, I like that idea of like, you keep it simple or you don't stick with the system, is because you're going to run into any kind of pre-baggage that you don't know exists.
Let's talk about baggage, because you're right. And you said the specific thing that I wanted to get to for just a second for us to touch on. The satanic panic is still in people's minds. Most people are aware through Stranger Things, the Dungeons and Dragons movie, so many other things that Dungeons and Dragons is not this weird thing that people had. But then some people still really do. Really, really, really do. Right? And the second you say Dungeons and Dragons, you lost those people. Right? I was in the Army. I was deployed. I was running a Dungeons and Dragons group. I won an award for running a Dungeons and Dragons group, right? Had a chaplain come in one day. Stand there. Look at us. Watch us. Leave. I'm like, that was weird. Came in the next week at the same time, mid-game. Then walks over. Starts talking to us, and we're telling him about the game. He's like, "You guys know you're devil worshiping, right?" I swear, I was like, "Sir," and I was not an officer, but I was like, "Sir, we're gonna have a problem if you keep going down this road," right? And he went down that road. He wanted to like get us all in trouble, and I went way above his head, and I was like, "Hey, Colonel, blah, blah, blah. I just want you to know your chaplain's doing X, Y, and Z." Took care of the situation. But some people still really have that idea of Dungeons and Dragons is all of these evil things. You're never going to work through those people's heads. But if you're telling them, "Hey, I'm building a social skills program, and it includes a game where they take on the ability to be their best selves," and you never tell that person while you're pitching it that you're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, they're going to get pretty far in before they ask a question that maybe makes you go, "Well, I know that some people have some bad like thinking about how this game is, but I have all this research." Right? And it's a good time to just say, "I have all this research that shows the value of these games, and I'm going to make sure that it's tailored to your students, your kids, whatever, so that they're doing the things that you believe in or support." You may not get them because they may still run into that cognitive bias and never be able to work through it. I never saw that chaplain again. Thank goodness. But you might also get them to go, "Okay, I'll try it." One of my coolest parents I ever dealt with through a library program was like, "I thought this was like a Satan thing." But then my kid came home and was so animated and excited. And they were telling me about what their friends did. And they were telling me about the things they did with their friends. This is a kid that has never done anything with other people. And they were like, "I don't care if they're doing Satanism. If it's Satanism, I'm all for it." And I was like, "It's definitely not Satanism, but it was cool to see them have that, like, a little bit of worry and then see the experience and work through it, right? I find too that when you get into a longer pitch, if you have one of these little anecdotes, even if it's someone else's anecdote or your own, that it's really valuable. Yes.
Just finish it quick second. Everyone's a geek about something.
Yes.
And if you can figure out what they're a geek about, you can usually find a good link in.
Absolutely.
Fantasy football is a role-playing game.
Yes.
Yes. Then there's like this whole other group of people who don't think it's Satan worshiping, but just find like Dungeons and Dragons. And maybe just the word like just like deeply unserious, but probably like
Yeah.
take it very seriously. So I feel like, I don't know, just like leaving the names of games out is helpful because they can imagine this like therapeutic game with a ton of research, which it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Without
It's
being
getting
like,
there,
oh,
it's
that's like some like weird nerdy thing that's not gonna be actually helpful.
And it's cool to then afterward get them to go, this is what Dungeons and Dragons can do? And it's like, yes. So I have two things I'm going to pass out, and then I have a story I want to tell. I am giving you each a card of mine and a card of a role-playing game that a friend of mine is kickstarting. I know I shouldn't be advertising, but I promised him that I would pass these out. It's about the cowboys and dinosaurs. It's super cool. Just check it out, please. It's cool.
So 603 area code, where is that?
New Hampshire. I'm originally from New Hampshire. I haven't lived there in, I don't know, 20 years, but you know, it's like.
C.ca, you're in Canada?
So my business partner is in Edmonton, and he started the website, so he got a Canadian thing. These are the worst business cards in the world. I put them together for another conference randomly because I was like, oh my gosh, I need them right now. So nothing is organized on it. Like they're not aligned very well. You'll see that my email address is not the URL for the website and things like that. Anyway, here's a story that I like to end these sorts of things with. I almost 20 years ago now was homeless. I was living in my car in San Diego after my sister said, hey, come live with me in San Diego. Come to find out she was also couch surfing. But got there, was homeless for quite a while. And then but I was still trying to play a role-playing game with friends of mine back in New Hampshire, right? And my friend said to me, hey, you're in a place, right, where you've been playing all these villains for years. Why don't you play a hero? And I struggled to create a heroic character. I've been playing bad guys. Even if I had played like a good guy, I was not playing good guys, right? I was in a bad spot, and I was like, this is reflecting everything, all the internal turmoil in these terrible characters. So I played a hero who took an entire nation that was neutral evil and turned them all neutral good. The system where you could change people's perceptions of things through magic, and he was actually going out and helping people, doing good things and showing them, like, this is how we can change the way we are doing things, right? Spent 4 years playing that character. I probably would not be alive today if I had not played that character. That character cared about other people. That character was a service-oriented character. He believed in helping people. Now I spend 98% of my life helping people in my day job, in all my side projects, because I believe in helping people. And I like to say that Dungeons and Dragons helped me get to be the character I wanted to be in life. So if you have to LARP being a good person for a while, do it, because it will help change you, right? It'll help get you to where you want to be. It's the anecdote I like to lean on with people, where I'm like, hey, I changed my entire life because of Dungeons and Dragons. I would not be where I am right now. I have a house. I would not have one if it were not for playing role-playing games. I learned how to be a public speaker from role-playing games. I learned lots of team-building activities. On my resume, I literally have on my resume that I regularly run small group experiences for between 5 and 50 people. And those sorts of team building and leadership activities are incredibly valuable, right? These are things that I know you all know that role-playing games do, right? But steal an anecdote. Tell your own anecdote about what role-playing games have done for you or other people, because they are powerful. I said recently at Serious Play that role-playing games are the most powerful tool for changing the world. I truly believe that. I truly believe that as a multi-entertainment, multimodal, transmedia thing, that role-playing games do things that nothing else does. They teach, they allow you to experience, they allow you to be different in a way that no other form of entertainment does. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully we worked out some pitch stuff together. If you want some more good advice, I recommend the awesome book, Therapeutically Applied Role-Playing Games, The Game to Grow Method, by the Kilmers and the Adams. Adam Davis, Adam Johns. Game to Grow is currently paused in their activities, but they are an awesome group to learn from if you have an opportunity to do any of their training in the future, or just read this book because it has an entire chapter on pitching things, and I think it's very useful. I used it for some of my notes here, and they call that chapter Spreading the Word. So I recommend it. I think we have a couple of minutes left. Okay, so if there are any questions, now is a good time. Yes.
Not so much a question as an observation. So, in developing pitches, what I'm almost amazed of is two things. First, there's geekdar, the ability to detect geekdom with someone you're about to pitch to.
Yeah.
And then to kind of have that pitch warmed up for that geek. So one of the partners I'm working with is an environmental education center in Philly. Happened to be there for a birthday party with my daughter. We got there early. And I was like, wouldn't this be a really cool place for us to play Dungeons and Dragons? And the woman was like, oh, I recently started playing. I totally agree. And I'm running a birthday party there in 2 weeks.
Nice.
So it all started from that initial question, which was a pitch, intentionally done so, but done as a question to my daughter.
Yeah.
She thought so too. And she goes to that camp now.
Nice.
But yeah, you never know when that pitch is going to happen.
If you're comfortable being open about being a geek, do it. Because like I have tons of art behind me in my office, right? So it starts conversations, and as I mentioned before, like that sometimes gets you real deep in someone's confidence when you're like, oh, we're on the same level, even if it's a totally different thing that they're a super big geek into, right? So, yes.
The entire reason this one and I are running groups together is because at some point I mentioned in like a random non-related like kind of what was it like
It was a new hire meeting,
Yeah.
which he had started at the same place we were like 3 months before I did. It was the one meeting that he went to because they were mandatory for the people who started behind it, but not for him.
Yeah.
He showed up to one, was like, I want to do a D&D therapy group thing.
Well, wasn't it? I just mentioned I was gonna play over the weekend, wasn't it?
No, somebody else said they had played for the first time, and you were like, ooh, I want to do that. I'm like, message in the chat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
We geeks gotta stick together.
That's right.
I think as it becomes more mainstream, I think that we're going to find it's maybe a little bit easier to pitch that way. Also, too, as I mean, not everybody wears their fandoms on their sleeves, literally, but I'm sure as it goes forward, that you'll find it's a little more common because of pop culture and also just with the changing of the guard as we age up, it's becoming us.
I think so.
Yeah.
15 years ago, there was basically no therapeutic role-playing game culture, right? It didn't exist. I wish it had, and I wish I'd known about it 15 years ago because I would have gone that route. Peace building's awesome, but I don't work in it, right? Because it doesn't pay, and therapy is not a big moneymaker either, always. But it's been my struggle because it's still my passion, right? Anyway, that was a segue, but yeah, I think it's going to be easier. I agree. Because we're a lot more mainstream, than we used to be, and there's a lot more like understanding that all of this is powerful.
So you don't have to be a therapist.
No.
No.
No, I'm making a claim. Yes.
You're right.
Yeah.
You can do the role-playing games.
Just don't call yourself a therapist.
Yeah.
That'll get you in a lot of trouble.
Right, right. And the thing is, like, role-playing games can do all of these things, and you can be doing different things with them.
Yeah.
Right? It's why I run the programs I do, because I know there's value in getting people to explore their experiences with each other. And role-playing games are just the tool for getting them to work through that.
Just on the side note of that, you don't have to be a therapist. I mean, I just got a big grant for my business back in Oregon through Medicaid, CCO out there, because they're looking for help in the schools to provide what they call tier 2 services. In other words, services that are not therapy level. These are unskilled, they're skilled professionals, but they're not licensed professionals. People who can work with kids, essentially, teaching them life skills or helping identify if they need to go to higher care. And there's a huge need for that. So there's a lot of funding organizations out there that are saying, hey, how do we cheaply bring a therapeutic tool or an educational tool to the masses that then either helps us quickly figure out who needs deeper services or prevents the need for deeper services.
NIH is doing lots of funding of things in this space. I will try and find a way to pass it along, but at Serious Play, there was a person from NIH that was there that was like, I want to give you money. And he was like, find a way to pitch me what you do so I can give you money, right? So if you look up, and I want to say they're SCIP programs, I could be wrong, but NIH they have lots of funds specifically earmarked for using gamification as a tool for different things, right? So I recommend you looking into that if that's something you want to try to seek funding for.
That's very helpful.
Sure it's SCIP?
No, I'm not.
Are you thinking of maybe the small business, SBIR?
No, maybe, but it's not through the Small Business Administration. It's through NIH.
Right, yeah.
So it might be SBIR.
Yeah.
Yep.
So having done a number of those grants,
Mhm.
haven't gotten one yet. Done as in written.
Yeah. Yep.
They are not for the lighthearted.
That's true, but and I wish I had it with me. They have people who will actually help you craft your pitch to pitch to them. And again, it may not get through, right? I've pitched to DHS for programs 5 times now, and not a single one has gotten picked up, right?
It took me 3 years to pitch to get the one I got.
Yeah. So we've said this a couple of times, like keep pitching, keep getting better at it. It's going to be hard. You will get through eventually. I feel like it will happen for everybody, and it may not, but it could. All right. Thank you, everybody. I have been Josh Heath. I've